Critical Role just stealthily changed the class of nearly every Campaign 4 character. So could it explain away some of the show's biggest mysteries? And is a new Araman-based D&D sourcebook now on the way?
What are you doing?
Solving a mystery, if that's quite alright with you.
Before we dive into some stealthy changes made by Critical Role after the overtures, and what it could mean for their future plans and storylines, why not take a second to hit those like and subscribe buttons to help us keep videos like this one coming. It really helps us out and we really appreciate it. And then, let's talk some Campaign 4. Critical Role has made some quiet changes to their official character info after the 4 overture episodes completed, and it could explain a lot of the mystery around Campaign 4 and characters like Wicander and Kattigan. In fact, in a move first really hinted at during our interview with Luis Carrazzo, where he talked about not considering Azune to be a multi-class sorcerer paladin, but rather a hybrid and something more. And then in our interview with Robbie Damon, where he talked about some unusual homebrewing he had to do to make his character Kattigan work the way he intended, and less like a standard D&D ranger, Critical Role has actually changed the classes of nearly every single character in Campaign 4. So why does this hint at a future big D&D compatible release from Darrington Press and Critical Role? And how can it shed light on some of the big mysteries of Campaign 4? Let's break it all down, starting with the new classes. So several days ago, Critical Role changed the official classes for the vast majority of their Campaign 4 characters, with just a few exceptions, specifically the fighters, rogues, and bards, which we will talk more about in just a minute. But the new classes they are using are Exemplars, which take the place of D&D's class of Paladins, Arcanists, which appear to be their new version of Wizards, Pact Magus, which is their replacement for Warlocks, Wild Mage, which is the replacement for the Druid class, Tracker, which replaces the classic D&D Ranger, and Prodigy Mage, which is the replacement for the Sorcerer class. Basically, every character but Hal, Sir Julian, and Thimble had their classes renamed, and those three are all some combination of fighter, rogue, or bard, which are terms that are way too common usage to be protected by copyrights or trademarks from D&D or Wizards of the Coast. This is important because one of the reasons for doing this seems to be something Critical Role has talked about often: creator-owned content. It's literally the entire reason for Critical Role's creation of the Beacon platform, and the reason they all broke away from Geek and Sundry so many years ago to found their own company. Creating classes with no copyright protections or trademark ties to D&D or Wizards of the Coast gives them greater license to turn those into their own third-party releases, which they can then sell directly to the fans using the 2024 rules found in the Creative Commons as the basis of their system, and then adding in all those renamed classes with their tweaked abilities plus all the lore and all the good stuff Brennan's been cooking up in the background. Sort of like a player's guide to Araman, if you will. Or like the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount book they released several years ago with D&D, but this time they would own all the rights and get to keep all the profits without having to split it. Which is something we brought up months ago when it was officially announced that D&D would be the system for Campaign 4. Even better, it gives them a product which they can then in turn sell back to D&D for D&D to license and distribute on D&D Beyond, which sort of lets them double dip in terms of creating product and content that they own while also appealing to the biggest market possible. But along with the potential sales of a third-party Araman sourcebook or a player's guide down the line, it also frees the players, Brennan and Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins, to create changes to those classes that better reflect the way they want to run their characters. Robbie has already talked with us about how he had to homebrew a lot of his combat abilities for Kattigan, but now as a tracker and not a D&D ranger, it's not even homebrew anymore, it's simply the different abilities functioning as intended for a similar but different class. This could potentially explain away a lot of the seeming incongruities between character actions and abilities versus their stated D&D classes in the first 5 episodes that may not have seemed something that they could have done in those original D&D versions of their classes. But by shifting to these new classes with these new names, suddenly it's not so much a mystery as it is the way this new class simply functions slightly differently than the D&D class it was based off of. For example, why did Lady Aranessa have access to so many spells that don't normally appear on a D&D druid spell list? Because she's not a druid, she's a wild mage. And a wild mage can have access to whatever spells the cast and the behind-the-scenes crew of Perkins and Crawford have deemed appropriate. She's not tied down by the rules and limitations of standard druids, even though she shares a lot of that flavor and that background, because she's just a similar but new class, which helps explain a lot of the things that Cass was doing, that didn't quite fit the mold of their originally revealed D&D classes. Now that doesn't quite solve every character mystery, as Sam Riegel's character Wicander still has no official class listed on the Critical Role website, and remains the only character to not have an official class at this point. So we're sure he still has some tricks up his sleeve, but if you're thinking he may just be a different D&D class, don't be shocked if he too winds up with a new non-D&D class as well, as more gets revealed about Wicander down the line. Also, fun side note, having these new classes suddenly gives them a lot of ammunition against the fanbase elements out there that constantly harp on them for playing their class wrong or quote not optimally, as just having it be a similar but different class that hasn't fully revealed all their new abilities means you don't know if something isn't possible or isn't working as intended or working optimally, and gives them a break from that occasionally toxic aspect of the Critical Role fandom where people just yell at them for quote not playing their characters right because the cast now has access to a bunch of information we don't have. At least until a potential sourcebook drops and we can pay for the privilege. But until then, Critical Role has set the table for some truly interesting ability reveals as they explore just how much these new character classes deviate from the D&D standards they were based off of, and potentially sets up the basis of some brand new D&D compatible source books in the not so distant future. And we are very excited to see what the cast and former D&D heads now working at Darrington and Critical Role have planned for us in 2026. So what do you think? Are you ready for a D&D sourcebook full of all these new Critical Role classes? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.